Mr. Garrett, Tom Garrett, Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses. I want to ask a series of very brief questions because I have a finite amount of time. I want to start with your understanding of the nature of the hearing today. The hearing that I was briefed on was entitled Advancing U.S. Interest in the Western Hemisphere. Is that your understanding as well? Okay, and you all are from the U.S. Department of State, correct? Okay, and yet it seems about half the room is focused primarily, almost exclusively, on separations of the border. Is that correct? A lot of questions on that. And so in the Department of State, do you all have oversight of HHS? Okay, do you have oversight of DHS?
We do not.
How about USCIS?
No.
How about USCBP?
We do not.
How about Customs and Border Patrol? I'm sorry, how about ICE?
We do not.
So none of those are within your purview, and yet you've, quote, gotten a lot of questions on that subject matter. It's amazing to me how well some people talk off of talking points. In fact, right now, the number of people under the age of 5 who we think are separated from their families is just over 100, and yet candidly, just off of the pre-planned talking points, we've covered about 14% of their cases in this committee hearing today. That's amazing. But what we've covered 0% of, and pardon me while I go on a little bit of a discourse here, are the roughly 4,000 Americans killed every year by unlicensed drivers who are here illegally. In other words, mathematically speaking, and we can't quantify these numbers because while we know about 13% of all highway fatalities nationally are caused by people who are here illegally, we don't quantify highway fatalities specifically by immigration status. However, what we do know is in the 10 states where you're licensed to drive regardless of your legal status, Maryland, California, et cetera, the number of highway deaths caused by people here illegally is closer to 14.5%. And so I guess if we looked at the numbers and we compared the number of people who are under the age of 5 who we think are currently separated from their families, there'd be about 40 Americans permanently separated from their families every single year for every one of them, but nobody's talked about that. And you all are from the State Department, and again, my condolences and gratefulness for you being here, but we've just determined, and I wish that I'd gone earlier in the hearing because maybe we could have saved some time, that you're not responsible for HHS, DHS, USCIS, USCBP, or ICE, which a lot of my friends across the aisle seem to want to abolish. So I apologize vicariously for the waste of your time. And I want to cover another thing real quickly that might be further within your purview. My good and distinguished colleagues and friends across the aisle, to include Mr. Meeks, Mr. Keating, Mr. Engel, Mr. Sherman, Ms. Bass, and Ms. Frankel, all have talked about horrific occurrences of gang violence in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador and Mexico. And it really gives me pause because I don't think that everyone in these countries are violent gang members. Do you all, based on your experience? The Northern Triangle has lots of good people, right? They're not all gang members, right?
Of course.
And yet we've heard horrible stories. In fact, we heard about Jose and Brian, whose mom was raped and murdered, and they came to this country because they were afraid that, and I quote, the same thing might happen to them. But all people in those countries, they're not bad people, right? There are some gang members in those countries, right? And some of the people who are there are good people, right? Likewise, though, what we haven't heard of is that any gang members might ever leave those countries and come here. Now, I understand that it's somewhat beyond the scope and purview of the responsibilities of the Department of State, but do we have reason to believe that some of the people who might come into this country illegally could also be gang members? Could that be? I mean, mathematically speaking, just give me a wild guess.
I mean, I don't think, certainly we at the State Department don't know.
Do you think it's possible? I mean, you're risen to the level of ambassador. I'm just asking you to positively.
I mean, in the realm of possibility, I mean, a lot of things are possible.
Right. Okay. And we've heard that a wall is not the solution, but just like a door being closed and locked might prevent someone from coming in a room, but doesn't always prevent someone from coming in a room, it might also be part of a solution while it's not a panacea. So I continue that it's remarkable to see this concern for these just over 100 people under the age of 5, but not within the purview of the Department of State, nor the scope of identifying and addressing, let me see, U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere. What is it that you'd like to have been asked about today very quickly that you haven't been asked about because nobody in this room seems to want to talk about the subject matter while you're here? Mr. Merten, Ambassador.
Sir, I think the questions we've got today are relevant to...
What is it that you'd like to have been asked about? What question would you like me to ask you?
Well, I would like you to ask me about the situation in Haiti.
Outstanding.
I know reasonably well.
I got 20 seconds. Please go over the situation in Haiti, and I apologize for having been distracted. There are people who are running for election. They got goals here. Well, they want to do.
Sure. Very quickly, we're very disturbed by the recent unrest in Haiti. We are happy to see that the Haitian police and the Haitian government have been able to reclaim control of the streets. We hope that the Haitian government continues to work to pacify the situation, the political situation in the country. And in Haiti, we really see that the answer to why people are out on the streets upset, rioting, is because there is a lack of economic opportunity. And this is something we drive home with them at every possible opportunity. They need to attract investors who want to come to Haiti. And there are investors who want to come to Haiti. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd yield back.
We appreciate